Don Rickles' funniest Tonight Show moments, Johnny Carson couldn't stop. The room Johnny heard before anyone else. Johnny Carson could hear danger before the audience could. A laugh that came back half a second too late. A guest who leaned forward too quickly. A silence that stayed in the air longer than it should have. Most people watching at home never noticed those things. Carson noticed all of them. That is why Don Rickles was so dangerous on The Tonight Show.
More corn, Harry! When you lead off, you're 38 now, right, Lou? Lou, are these too tough? And at 38, you gotta say, come on, leg. Come on, you mother, move! Move!
Rickles did not wait for a polite opening. He created one by attacking the safest person in the room first, Johnny himself. Then he moved to Ed McMahon, then Doc Severinsen and the band, then Frank Sinatra. Then a Hall of Fame baseball player who came to talk about the World Series and walked off the couch having been roasted by a comedian who did not know the difference between a curveball and a screwball. And somewhere in the middle of all this, Rickles broke a small cigarette box that had sat on Johnny's desk for 9 years. Most hosts would have replaced the box and moved on. Carson did something else. He walked off his own stage, marched into another studio, stopped a sitcom in the middle of a take, and confronted Don Rickles in front of a camera that was not even supposed to be his. Tonight, we are not just looking at the funniest Rickles moments on The Tonight Show. We are looking at the rule Rickles kept breaking, and the one reason Johnny Carson never wanted him to stop.
Sitting there going, down, 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 down. Oh, this is Frank Johnny's box. Ooh.
Stay with the cigarette box, because halfway through this story, Carson stops behaving like a host, and near the end, when Carson is saying goodbye to television forever, Rickles will do the most dangerous thing he could possibly do. He will refuse to go soft. The temperature of the room. For 30 years, Johnny Carson was the most listened-to voice in American homes after midnight. People sat with him while they were doing dishes, while they were folding laundry, while they were lying in the dark trying to fall asleep with the television flickering on their bedroom wall. He was the man who turned strangers in his living room into friends in your living room. And he did it without ever raising his voice. Carson's secret was not his jokes. He had jokes, yes. He had a desk, a sidekick, a band, and a curtain. But none of those things were what made him great. What made him great was an ear. Carson could hear what a room was doing. Most hosts hear the loudest laugh in the studio. Carson could hear the smallest one. He could feel when a guest was leaning into him too eagerly, looking for protection. He could feel when an audience tightened up because a joke had landed wrong. He could feel when the woman in the third row stopped laughing 30 seconds ago. And he would steer the conversation in another direction before the cameraman even noticed. A television studio has weather. Warm laughs, nervous laughs, polite laughs. Laughs that mean the joke worked. Laughs that mean people are just laughing because they are afraid not to. Carson could tell the difference. That was the gift. That was the engine. That was the entire show. And then a short, loud man from Queens, New York would walk through the curtain and decide, just for the next 15 minutes, that he was going to test exactly how much weather Johnny Carson could handle. Don Rickles did not come on The Tonight Show to be charming. He came on to push the room until something cracked. The strange part is that nothing ever did.
Oh, funniest monologue I've ever heard. Heard you many, many years. Yeah. Tonight was the funniest, so enjoy it. I know you.
Yeah.
When you're on 26 years, I mean, where's the challenge?
Gives you a charge.
Yeah, what do you need a charge? 26 years. Walk away. It's over.
Yeah.
So what's new besides the competition?
I'll tell you what. I like competition.
The night Rickles came after the king. Most guests walked onto Carson's stage hoping to be lifted. They needed Johnny to laugh at their story. They needed him to like them enough to ask the second question, the deeper one, the one that made the audience love them too. Carson could do that. He had been doing it for so long that the magic looked easy. Rickles arrived with a different plan. He did not need lifting. He did not want a second question. He was not there to promote a movie or a record or a new sitcom on another network. He was there to do exactly one thing: to make sure that by the end of the segment, nobody in the room had been left alone. And the first person he came after was always Johnny. He went after Carson's age. He told Johnny, on the air, that 26 years was long enough for any one job, and maybe it was time to walk away. He went after Carson's money, the house at the beach, the cars, the wife, the obvious comfort of a man who had been one of the highest-paid people on television for 2 decades. He looked at Johnny's clothes one night and decided he was dressed like a Chinese yo-yo, and he said it on the air, and the studio went up. With anyone else, those lines would have been an insult. With Carson, they were a gift. Because Carson spent most of his career being the king of the room, the man who decided what was funny, the man who decided when to move on, the man who, with a single raised eyebrow, could turn a polite chuckle into a wave of laughter, or could shut down a misfire with one calm look at Ed. That kind of authority is a heavy thing to carry every night. 5 nights a week, 90 minutes a night, for the better part of 30 years, Rickles took it off him. When Rickles attacked Carson first, the rest of the room exhaled. The actress, who was about to come out and promote her romantic comedy, realized that nobody on this stage was being treated like royalty tonight.
You know,
Plow furrowing contest, Nebraska.
pardon me?
Plow furrowing contest. You know what a plow furrowing contest is?
No, I'm a Jew from New York. We don't investigate things like that.
Well, we bought the plows from you.
Oh, I think so.
Anyway.
That was a good one. Hey, sit back.
The athlete, who was nervous about being interviewed by an intellectual, realized that Johnny himself was being treated like a regular guy who happened to have a nice house. The audience realized that if Carson could take it, they could laugh at it. And Johnny laughed louder than anyone, because for the first time that night, he did not have to be the king. Somebody else was carrying the show. That was the deal. Rickles came for Carson first, and Carson loved him for it, because attacking the king was Rickles' way of telling the country, in a language only Carson fully spoke, that nobody in this room was too important to be human.
Guido says hi. He hasn't had a chance to talk to you. And from Jersey City, your good friend, Bubani Umbatso.
What's
He
his name?
started his car. He started his car with your album on, and now he's a highway.
The night Sinatra became reachable. Frank Sinatra did not walk into rooms. He arrived in them. By the late 1970s, Sinatra had been famous for so long that the air changed when he came near a stage. He carried his voice. He carried Las Vegas. He carried the memory of every magazine cover, every album, every late-night rumor about who he knew and what those people did for him. When he sat down on a couch, the couch did not feel like furniture anymore. It felt like a throne nobody else was qualified to sit on. Hosts knew how to handle Sinatra. You spoke to him with respect. You let him talk about whatever he wanted. You did not interrupt. You did not push him about old songs he was tired of singing. And you absolutely did not bring up the names of the people he did not want to discuss. That was the rule.
Hey, Frank, it's good to see you. I just was hanging around in the hall, and they said Frank Sinatra's here, and I've never met him, you know. And I get the chills.
You'll excuse us, won't you?
Certainly.
Marco Mangananzo was hurt. Fambino Bombazzo, 2 bullets in the head Thursday.
Rickles walked into Sinatra's appearances on The Tonight Show with the rule in one hand and a match in the other. He would stroll out as if he had been wandering the hallway. He would explain, with mock embarrassment, that he had just heard Frank Sinatra was in the building, and he had never met him. And would Frank mind, just for a minute, if Don sat down and said hello? Then he would lean in toward the most powerful man in show business and start talking to him like a guy in the next booth at a diner. He would interrupt Sinatra mid-sentence. He would invent fake friends from Sinatra's old neighborhood and bring greetings from them. He would tell stories about Sinatra's records that nobody had ever told. And Frank Sinatra laughed. That was the part nobody quite understood. The man who, on any other night, would have walked out of the room had laughed instead. He laughed because Rickles was the only person in entertainment who treated him like a regular human being. Not in a way that disrespected him, but in a way that said,
I worship you and I love you. I really mean this, because since I'm a kid, I used to blow in girls' ears and hear you go, la-da-da-dee, and do it my way. I need a girl so bad.
I see you. I love you. And I refuse to pretend you're anyone other than a guy from Hoboken who happens to sing pretty well. That is why Carson loved having Rickles on those nights. Rickles did not bring Sinatra down. He brought Sinatra closer. He pulled him off the pedestal just long enough for the audience to feel, for the first time, that they were sitting in the same room as Frank Sinatra. Not watching him on a stage, sitting with him. He did the same thing with Bob Hope. He did it with Desi Arnaz. He did it with anyone who walked in carrying too much legend. 3 generations of comedy on one couch, and Rickles set the pace for all of them. Hope, who had been famous when Rickles was still a boy. Arnaz, who had built the modern American sitcom from scratch, and Rickles, the loud insult artist from Queens, telling them both to keep up. It should not have worked. It worked every time. Because Rickles was not making fun of legends. He was reminding the audience that legends are people. And in a country that loves to turn its famous men into statues, that was a generous thing to do.
Bless you, birds. Working a bird museum. But, hey, Lou, isn't it funny staying up late?
The couch turns hot. By the time a guest had been on the Tonight Show 3 or 4 times, they understood the unspoken deal. Johnny would protect you. He would ask the right questions. He would steer around the topics you did not want to discuss. He would make you look smart, funny, and likable in front of millions of people. And in exchange, you would behave. That was the contract. Most guests kept it. When Rickles walked in, the contract dissolved. Lou Brock was one of the best players in the history of baseball. By 1977, he had more than 3,000 hits. He had stolen more bases than anyone alive. He had played in 3 World Series. When he came on the show that September, he was a national hero, and he had every right to expect that the segment would be about him. Rickles spent most of it correcting him. Lou Brock did not need posture advice from a comedian. He did not need pacing tips. He did not need to be told on national television that he was acting like a man trapped in a psychiatrist's office. But Rickles handed all of those notes to him anyway, in a steady, confident voice, as if he was the senior man in the room and Brock was the rookie.
Let's do one thing at a time. Otherwise, if we get back...
Fine, I get the feeling I'm at a clinic and you're my psychiatrist. And I know your problems. Anyway, laugh, Lou. Anyway, and I met your wife, Virgie, in the back. She said, Lou's gonna steal more bases. Anyway.
The strange thing is that Brock laughed. Carson laughed harder. He laughed because he was watching one of the world's greatest athletes be coached in real time by a man who almost certainly could not hit a major league fastball if you spotted him 3 strikes. The mismatch was the joke, and Brock, who was a generous man, let himself become part of it. This was Rickles' deepest trick. He kept rotating targets. The band would catch a line. Ed would catch one. The audience would catch one. Then the next guest. Then back to Carson. He never stopped on any single person long enough for them to feel singled out. Everyone got hit, which meant nobody felt picked on. He made the entire room guilty together, and shared guilt feels a lot like friendship. Carson watched the whole thing happen, and you can see, even decades later, the way his face changes during these moments. He stops trying to lead the conversation. He stops looking down at his note cards. He puts his pencil down. He lets the room run. He is not surrendering. He is enjoying himself. And then, somewhere around the middle of one of those wild nights, Rickles touched the one object on that stage that belonged completely to Johnny Carson.
It's notes. This is not your land, you crazy cunt. You're not going to have the land. You stupid man, you're not going to have the land. There's no good. This is not your land. You take... Come on. Oh, Carson's cigarette box. Oh, I broke his box. I broke Carson's cigarette box.
The broken box. The cigarette box on Johnny Carson's desk was not an important object. It was a piece of polished wood, big enough to hold a few packs of cigarettes, small enough that nobody who came on the show ever really noticed it. It just sat there. For 9 years. For 9 years, it sat next to Johnny's right hand, while he interviewed presidents and movie stars and astronauts. It sat through every monologue, every guest, every break. It was part of the desk. The desk was part of the show. And on the Tonight Show, the desk was the center of everything. One night, in front of a live studio audience, Don Rickles broke it. We do not need to know exactly how. He grabbed it, he dropped it, he slammed it for a joke. The mechanics do not matter. What matters is that by the end of his appearance, a small wooden box that had quietly served Johnny Carson for nearly a decade was sitting on the desk in 2 pieces. A normal night would have ended there. The crew would have swept up the splinters. The prop department would have ordered a replacement. The show would have moved on. This was not a normal night.
How long I've had the cigarette box on this desk?
You brought that up from New York City?
I brought this from New York. What on earth?
It happened last night.
Who?
Don Rickles.
I did not see the
Don
show
Rickles
last
did it last night.
night. You put me on now.
No. Don Rickles did it last night on the show.
What the hell did he do with it? The wood is broken. That's an heirloom. Be right back. Come on. Just started the show. I picked my box up off my desk that I've had for 9 years. My box is broken. They told me you broke it.
The next evening, Carson taped his monologue. He picked up what was left of his box. He looked at it. He told the audience exactly what had happened. He told them how long the box had been there. He told them, in the calm and deliberate voice that he used when something was about to happen, that Don Rickles had broken his property. And then Johnny Carson did something that no host of his stature was supposed to do. He left. He left his own stage. He walked out of his own studio. He went down the hallway of the NBC building. He found the soundstage where Don Rickles was at that very moment, taping his sitcom CPO Sharkey. He walked through the door. He stepped into another show's set. And he stopped the taping. The camera on Rickles' stage kept rolling. The audience at Rickles' show did not know what they were seeing. Rickles knew immediately. You can watch the recording today and see his face. There is a comedian who has spent 30 years being unflappable, suddenly looking like a man who has been caught doing something at school. He tries to talk his way out of it. He stammers. He apologizes. He starts a sentence and cannot finish it. Carson does not let him. Carson tells him, with the precision of a man who has rehearsed this in his head all afternoon, exactly what the box was, exactly how long he had it, and exactly who broke it. Then he destroys Rickles' desk. He walks across the set and breaks the prop desk on the sitcom, in front of Rickles' cast, in front of Rickles' audience, in front of 2 networks worth of cameras. The audience screams. Rickles laughs in disbelief. Carson walks out. It is one of the strangest, funniest, most carefully unplanned moments in the history of late-night television, and it is the moment that explains everything. Because Johnny Carson did not save the show by stopping Rickles. He saved the show by following him into the chaos.
Nah, I'm not going on. Come back! Louis Billson, he give him a solo, he goes bananas. How you feel, Louis? I spoke to Pearl, she's fed up.
Mr. Warmth was not a joke. It was a promise. If you tried to describe Don Rickles to someone who had never heard of him, you would probably start with the word insult. He was an insult comedian. That is the label history has given him. That is how the books describe him. That is how the obituaries described him when he passed. It is true, in the same way that calling the ocean wet is true. It does not really tell you anything. The label misses what Rickles was actually doing. An insult is a weapon. You aim it, you fire it. You hope it lands on the person it was meant for, and you accept that it might hurt. Real insults end relationships. Real insults make rooms colder, not warmer. If Rickles had been a real insult comedian, the audience would have winced for 60 seconds and then turned the channel. That is not what happened.
Okay, look at your notes and let's get it over with.
Who needs notes with you?
Oh,
We've known
it's
each
good
other
to see
so
you, John.
long.
Really, it really
We have
is.
not seen each other
And we haven't...
for at least 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, it really has. So,
Not
you know,
s-
my career has been... But it's Dave Tebbutt and Bob Wood and Freddie Silverman, they all sit together and go, what are we going to do with the Jew? What are we going to do? You know, and one black guy in the hall goes, I know what to do with him. By the way, I saw Joanna in the fashion show. Your wife, you remember
Yeah.
Joanna, the 8x10?
Yeah, oh, come on.
She's sitting home now in the estate going, I hope he brings the check.
What Rickles was actually doing was something much harder. He was reading the room. Constantly. Every second. When he threw a line at Carson, he was watching Carson's mouth, Carson's eyes, the way the audience inhaled, the way Ed laughed, the half second between the punch and the response. If the response came back warm, he pushed further. If it came back even slightly tight, he backed off. He would soften the next line. He would put his arm around the person he had just teased. He would say something kind in the same breath as something brutal, so the kindness landed first. This is not insult comedy. This is something closer to musicianship. Carson understood that. Carson was the only host of his generation who fully understood it, and so Carson gave Rickles a nickname, Mr. Warmth. He said it on the air over and over for years. He introduced Rickles with it. He referred to him by it during interviews. He made sure the audience heard the phrase often enough that it became permanent. On its surface, the nickname is a joke. The meanest comedian in America being called the warmest man in show business. The contradiction is supposed to be funny, and it is funny. But it was never just a joke. It was a permission slip. When Johnny Carson, the most trusted voice on American late-night television, the man who had been welcomed into millions of bedrooms 5 nights a week, when that man stood up on his stage and called Don Rickles Mr. Warmth, he was telling the country something important. He was telling them how to listen. He was saying, do not listen to the words. Listen to what is underneath the words. Listen to the friendship in the room. Listen to the affection. Listen to the trust. The cruelty on top is a costume. The warmth is real. The audience needed that signal. Without it, Rickles' act would have read as bullying. With it, the act became something almost tender. A man who used the language of insult to express something that was, underneath, very close to love. Carson did not need to give a speech to explain Rickles. He needed 2 words. And then he gave them, every chance he got, until the country had memorized them. This is what most people miss about The Tonight Show. They remember the jokes, they remember the laughs, they remember the famous guests. They do not always notice the quiet management of meaning that Carson did, every single night, with a few well-placed phrases. Mr. Warmth was one of those phrases. It told 3 million viewers every time it was spoken that the man on the couch was safe, that the cruelty was a performance, that the laughter was permitted, that the friendship was real. Without that phrase, Rickles might have been just another comedian. With it, he became a Tonight Show institution.
I'm off of booze.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Give him a prize. What do I care? I remember you made up for a lot when you were drinking. The old days used to just lay around the restaurant going, and people said, that's Johnny Carson. Throw him out. Right away, a vicious guy. I hope your penguin dies in your tub.
The night Ed McMahon took the hit. If Johnny Carson was the host of The Tonight Show, Ed McMahon was its heart. Ed was the man at the side of the desk, the man who laughed first, the man who said, "Here's Johnny," with the same enthusiasm 30 years in a row, as if every night was opening night. He was the warm hand on the show's shoulder. He absorbed the awkward moments before the audience could feel them. When a joke landed badly, Ed laughed loud enough to cover it. When a guest got nervous, Ed leaned in and made them feel like they had a friend in the room. He was not a sidekick in the small sense of that word. He was the show's cushion. Don Rickles spent most of 3 decades trying to set the cushion on fire. There was an evening when Ed announced on the air that he had just gotten engaged. This was good news. This was the kind of moment where a host would normally raise a glass, say something gracious, and let the audience clap. That is what Carson did. That is what the band did. That is what the audience did. Rickles took one look at the situation and did something else. He launched into a full roast of Ed's engagement. He questioned the bride's judgment. He suggested, with mock seriousness, that she must not have been paying attention when she said yes. He asked, on the air, whether Ed had told her about his drinking. He made jokes about Ed's age. He made jokes about Ed's appearance. He turned a piece of personal good news into an open invitation to roast the man who was supposed to be the safest person on the set. Ed sat there, glass in hand, and laughed harder than anyone. That is the part that surprises people when they watch the tape now. Ed is not embarrassed. Ed is not pretending to be a good sport. Ed is genuinely delighted. He is being publicly teased by his friend, on his own engagement night, in front of millions of strangers, and he is having one of the best times of his life. That is because Ed had signed the same quiet contract that everyone in the room had signed. He had read the same permission slip. He knew what Mr. Warmth meant. He knew that Rickles only roasted people he loved. He knew that the harder Rickles came after him, the more loved he was. Carson watched the whole thing with the satisfied face of a man whose dinner guests were entertaining themselves. This is one of the deeper rules of The Tonight Show that almost never gets discussed. In 30 years of late-night television, hundreds of comedians passed through Johnny Carson's couch. Many of them were sharp. Some of them were mean. A few of them tried to be edgy. Almost none of them were allowed to roast Ed McMahon. Ed was the cushion. You did not punch the cushion. You did not embarrass the man who was responsible for making everyone else feel comfortable. Rickles was the only exception. Rickles roasted Ed for years. Ed loved every minute of it. That is how you know it was never really insult comedy. Real cruelty does not earn that kind of loyalty. Real cruelty does not get invited back. Ed McMahon, for 30 years, kept laughing because, somewhere underneath the loud language and the rapid-fire mockery, Ed knew exactly what was happening. Two friends were entertaining a country, and the country could feel it. The comedian who made danger feel safe. To understand why Carson let Rickles do what no other guest could do, you have to understand something about the comedian himself. Don Rickles came up in nightclubs, small ones mostly, rooms where the audience was 4 feet away and the lights were dim enough that he could see every face. He started by trying to do regular jokes the way every other comedian did, and he failed. He was not bad at it, he just was not memorable. Then one night, somebody in the audience walked out in the middle of his set. Rickles, on instinct, said something rude to the man as he left. The room laughed. Not a polite laugh, a real laugh. The kind of laugh that tells a young performer, "Do that again." So he did. He started teasing the audience. He started picking on the guy in the front row with the loud shirt. He started telling the woman in the back booth that her hairdo looked like she had lost a fight with a vacuum cleaner. The harder he went, the more they loved it. But here is the part that made him different from every other comedian who tried the same thing. He never aimed for the soft spot. He picked on the guy's shirt, not the guy's marriage. He picked on the woman's hair, not her weight. He picked on the way a customer was sitting, not the customer's life. He kept it on the surface. He kept it on the costume. He never went for the wound. And he had a second rule, an invisible rule that took him decades to teach to himself. He always laughed at himself first. Watch any Rickles set, including any of his Tonight Show appearances, and you will see it. Within the first 60 seconds, he will say something self-deprecating. He will mock his own height. He will mock his own bald head. He will mock the fact that he is a short, loud man from Queens trying to make a living in show business. By doing that, he gives the audience permission to laugh at everyone, including him. It is a generous form of cruelty, if such a thing can exist. He never asks his targets to absorb something he would not absorb himself. That is what Carson saw. Other hosts would book Rickles once and never again. The energy was too high. The pace was too fast. The lines came too quickly to be vetted by a censor or smoothed by a producer. Carson booked him constantly. Carson watched the same act night after night, year after year, and never got tired of it. Because Carson, who was a careful and quiet man in private, saw something in Rickles that very few people ever fully see in a friend. He saw a performer who looked dangerous on the surface and was, underneath, one of the safest people in the room. A man who would never embarrass his host without warning. A man who would never go after a guest's real pain. A man who, no matter how loud the act got, always made sure the room left warmer than it had been when he walked in. You could build a career on a man like that. You could build a show around him. You could trust him with the night. And Johnny Carson did, for nearly 30 years. The goodbye he refused to sweeten. In the spring of 1992, Johnny Carson announced he was retiring. 30 years of late-night television were ending. He had decided to step away while he was still on top, while the audience still loved him, while the show was still his. He set a date, May 22nd, 1992, and the country began the long, strange ritual of saying goodbye to a man most people had never met, but felt like they had known forever. The last few weeks of the show were emotional. Bette Midler sang to him and made him cry on the air. Robin Williams sat across from him and tried to make him laugh through it. The studio audience, which had been laughing in that room for decades, kept applauding longer than they needed to, because nobody knew when they would get to do it again. Everyone who came on the show in those final weeks softened. They came out gentle. They brought gifts. They told stories about the first time Johnny had been kind to them. They thanked him. They cried. And then, near the end, Don Rickles walked through the curtain. The audience knew what they wanted from Rickles. They wanted the same thing everyone else had given. A nice story, a heartfelt thank you, a soft moment between two old friends, captured for the history books before Carson packed up his desk and left. That is not what they got. Rickles came out talking. He did not wait for an introduction. He started teasing Carson before he sat down. He pointed out that Carson was not retiring. He was being asked to leave. He suggested on the air that NBC had finally figured out how to get rid of him. He looked at the audience and asked them why they were still showing up, since the show was about to be over anyway. He kept going. He went after Carson's money. He went after Carson's wife. He went after the choice of guests. He went after Bob Newhart, who was sitting across the room. He went after the band. He went after the audience. He went after everything. For a few minutes, it looked like Rickles had simply not gotten the memo, as if nobody had explained to him that this was supposed to be a tender night, and he was supposed to bring kindness with him. But the people in that room who knew him best, Johnny, Ed, the producers, the writers, the crew, those people understood exactly what was happening. Rickles had gotten the memo. He had read it carefully. He had decided to ignore it. And by ignoring it, he was giving Carson the most honest goodbye anyone had given him all month. Because here was the truth that everyone else was too sentimental to see. Johnny Carson did not need another soft moment. He had been receiving soft moments from celebrities, audiences, executives, and strangers for 40 years. He had been the smoothest, kindest, most graceful man on American television for so long that gentleness had become the background music of his entire life. What Carson needed on his way out the door was the thing he had loved most about The Tonight Show, the thing he had built the whole show around, the thing that made him want to come back to work night after night, decade after decade. He needed someone to come into the room and not pretend. That was what Rickles gave him. By refusing to be sentimental, Rickles told Carson, in the only language they had ever spoken to each other, that nothing had changed, that the friendship was still the friendship, that the comedy was still the comedy, that Carson was not being treated like a fragile, retiring legend who needed to be cushioned for the last time. He was being treated, on his final week, the way he had been treated since the very first time Rickles walked out and called him an old man. It was the cruelest farewell any guest gave Carson in those final weeks, and it was, almost certainly, the one he loved the most. You can see it in the tape. Carson is not just laughing. He is laughing with his eyes closed. He is laughing the way a man laughs when something is hitting him in two places at once, the funny part on the surface and something else deeper underneath. Because Rickles is doing the only thing he was ever asked to do on that show. He is being honest. And honesty, with Rickles, always looked like an insult. The guest, Johnny Carson, never wanted to stop. Don Rickles did not make Johnny Carson look weak. He made Carson's control visible. Anyone can run a quiet room. Carson could run a room that was laughing too hard to obey him. That was the gift. That was the trick. That was the entire point of having Rickles on the show, decade after decade after decade. He broke the rhythm of the interview. He ignored the questions. He attacked the host. He teased the sidekick. He interrupted Sinatra. He coached a Hall of Famer. He turned an engagement announcement into a public roast. He broke a small wooden box that had quietly served Johnny for 9 years. And then, when it was time to say goodbye, he refused to soften the goodbye. And Carson kept opening the door. Not because he was helpless, not because he was tired, not because he had no other guests to choose from. He had every comedian in America at his disposal. He could have stopped inviting Rickles at any moment, and nobody would have asked why. He kept inviting him because he understood something most television producers did not. A show built entirely on safety eventually becomes boring. A show built entirely on chaos eventually becomes exhausting. A great show is the one that knows how to do both at the same time. A show where the safety is real and the chaos is real, and the audience can feel the difference between the two even when they are sitting inside the same 5 minutes. That is what Rickles gave Carson. Every time he walked through that curtain, he gave him the chaos, he gave him the noise, he gave him the danger. And underneath all of it, he gave him the one thing every host secretly wants and almost never gets. A guest who trusts the host so completely that he is willing to break the rules on the air in front of the country and let the host catch him. For 30 years, Carson caught him. Every time. You can call Don Rickles an insult comedian if you want. The books will. The encyclopedias will. The obituaries did. But anyone who watched him with Johnny Carson, who really watched, who paid attention to the laughter underneath the words, and the affection underneath the language, and the warmth underneath the noise, knows what he really was. He was the guest who told the late-night audience, one loud sentence at a time, that this place was safe, that this room was a home, that the man behind the desk was the kind of friend who could take a joke about his age, his money, his clothes, his sidekick, his band, his furniture, and his retirement, and still want you back next week. That was the show. That was the love. That was the secret. Don Rickles was the guest Johnny Carson could not stop, and the guest Johnny Carson never really wanted to stop. Which Rickles moment still makes you laugh the hardest? The Sinatra interruption, the Lou Brock coaching session, the broken cigarette box, or the final farewell he refused to sweeten? Drop it in the comments below. And if this story brought back the kind of late-night television that does not exist anymore, hit subscribe so the next one finds its way to you.